right now, it appears to be the biggest bust in NBA history. I don't recall a #1 overall pick in the NBA draft being this bad.
In 2017, Markelle Fultz was one of the most exciting and hyped prospects of the decade, but now, after a career of disappointment and setbacks, he can't even find a team that wants to sign him. He was supposed to be the guy that made the Sixers a true contender, but that never happened. Instead, they shipped him off with no intention of ever having to deal with him again. What happened? The next James Harden turned into one of the biggest busts in NBA history, and it wasn't even his fault. Well, depending on who you ask. The story of Markelle Fultz is a tragic one, and he'll forever be one of the biggest what-ifs in the history of the game. Before we get to the content, we're 5,000 subscribers away from 1 million subs, so make sure to check to see you're subscribed to help us get there. And now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Summer's officially over, which means NBA season's right around the corner, which is why I need to tell you about my special hookup today from SeatGeek. Everyone can use my promo code TheFlightMike10 to get 10% off of their next order, and this is no matter how many times you bought tickets with SeatGeek before. My promo code TheFlightMike10 will get you 10% off of your next order. SeatGeek offers tickets for sports, festivals, concerts, you name it. I love SeatGeek because they rate on a scale of 1 to 10 in regards to the best deal that you're getting. Green dots mean good, red dots mean bad. So take out your phone, open up the SeatGeek app, and add code TheFlightMike10 to your account. What are you waiting for? Do it now because this offer is only available for a limited time. And thank you, SeatGeek, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Markelle Fultz was on top of the world all the way back in high school. Growing up playing basketball at DeMatha Catholic High School, which is a pretty historic school for the sport, because it produced all NBA guys like Adrian Dantley and Victor Oladipo. So Markelle Fultz definitely had some big shoes to fill. Early on in his career at DeMatha, things weren't looking too good. He got cut from the varsity team as a sophomore because of his 5'9" frame, but luckily he had a huge growth spurt before his junior season where Markelle would grow a whole 6 inches, and little did he know how much this growth spurt would change his life. Markelle was already a ridiculously skilled basketball player, but now he had the height to be a real NBA prospect, and he showed that in his junior year, averaging 16.8 points, 7.9 rebounds, and 4.3 assists per game as the team's starting point guard, grabbing the eyes of colleges everywhere, but especially the University of Washington, which is where Markelle would ultimately commit to playing college basketball before his senior season at DeMatha. Now, this was seen as a very interesting commit because Washington wasn't really known for its ability to put stars into the NBA. They weren't known for their ability to develop talent. As a matter of fact, the most prominent NBA prospect to come out of Washington was Isaiah Thomas, and he was taken with the final pick in his NBA draft. But it didn't matter. At this point, Fultz was a super well-known recruit amongst even the most casual of fans, but his senior year would change everything. Markelle had already committed to Washington, but he still had a ton to prove. So he went out and averaged 19 points and 8.8 rebounds per game, breaking the DeMatha single-season record for assists with 278 as a senior, and graduating as a top 3 recruit in the country. He was an absolute monster, a silky smooth ball handler, and an even better finisher, and it looked like absolutely nobody could guard him. So it was exciting to see him play at the collegiate level. Once he got to Washington, Markelle somehow got even better. Washington as a team was terrible due to DeJounte Murray and Marquise Chris both prematurely declaring for the 2016 NBA draft, but Fultz alone had fans tuning into every game. And at Washington, Markelle Fultz made basketball look easy. He pretty much cruised to 23.2 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists per game, and was easily the best player heading into the 2017 NBA draft. That is to everybody but Danny Ainge and the Boston Celtics. In one of the deepest drafts in NBA history that featured names like Markelle Fultz, Lonzo Ball, and Jason Tatum at the top, Boston Celtics held the first overall pick and the opportunity to draft their next franchise guy. It seemed like there was no question about it. They were going to select Markelle Fultz. They selected Jaylen Brown the season before, and Markelle was perceived as the missing piece. But instead, they did one of the strangest things we've seen in NBA history, a move that is relatively rare. Prior to the NBA draft, the Boston Celtics made a deal with the Philadelphia 76ers to trade back 2 picks and give Philadelphia their choice of the lot, and that player was always Markelle Fultz.
With the first pick in the 2017 NBA Draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Markelle Fultz from the University of Washington.
Philadelphia and everybody except Boston had Fultz at the top of their boards, but Danny Ainge would go on to say that Tatum was always the guy for Boston, which I guess you can make an argument that it kind of made sense considering the guard depth that Boston had at the time between Isaiah Thomas, Jaylen Brown, and Marcus Smart. But if you paid attention, Marcus Smart was more of a high-end two-way 2 guard. Isaiah Thomas was a complete liability at the defensive side of the ball, and he was coming off of a hip injury, and Jaylen Brown was more of a 3. Markelle Fultz was considered to be a player that boasted remarkable two-way potential. When I scouted him at the time coming out of Washington, I compared him to Dwayne Wade, but with a much better 3-pointer and the ability to be one of the greatest defensive players in the NBA, primarily because of his length. But considering where Fultz is at now, and the fact that Jason Tatum just led Boston to a championship, this was the best decision Danny Ainge could have made. But at the time, people were buzzing about the Philadelphia 76ers because they just went all in on their young core. Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz, and Joel Embiid was the most exciting core in all of basketball. They were being compared to the early 2010s OKC Thunder, and honestly, those comparisons made a lot of sense. And rightfully so, the Philadelphia 76ers went into the season with some of the most hype that they've ever seen in a decade because of this core. But it didn't take that long for the hype to ultimately crumble. In only his 4th game, Markelle Fultz suffered an injury that really didn't seem super serious at the time, but it would end up being the most unusual injury that we've ever seen in NBA history. Something the Philadelphia 76ers called a severe muscle imbalance in his right shoulder, causing him to completely lose his shooting form and even making him shoot free throws like this.
And the Heat now at the team foul limit. The Sixers, for their part in the penalty, a rather unusual pitch in the free throw there by Markelle Fultz.
In all my years watching the NBA, I've never seen something like this before. People were so skeptical of this injury that they thought that Markelle Fultz just had the yips and the bright lights were just getting to him. But Philly did end up confirming the legitimacy of this injury. This completely derailed any chance Fultz had of making an immediate impact, and it's so unfortunate and very, very strange as well. I mean, if you take a look at his brief summer league footage, there was a mild change in the way this man shot the basketball. If you just compare it to the way he was shooting at Washington, obviously it's a little different, but at least he was still able to shoot jumpers, although you didn't really see him shoot as many 3-pointers in the summer league. But once he got to the NBA, this issue got way worse. He only played in 33 games over 2 seasons in a Sixers jersey on some of the worst efficiency we've ever seen. And this is due to consistent nerve damage before they sent him away because he had to completely relearn his jump shot. And the worst part of all is Markelle Fultz never did. When Fultz was asked about how his shoulder injury affected his jump shot in 2021, he would respond by saying this: "When I would go up to shoot, it almost felt like I had a too small suit jacket on. It felt like somebody was almost holding my arm there." When he was asked about his free throw pump fakes too, he said, "I would lose feeling in my hand. I would get here and I wouldn't feel like the ball was in my hand. My muscles are pushing on my nerve, which is cutting my feeling off. I can't even imagine how that feels." But still, Markelle still showed some flashes of his potential in his time as a Sixer, including when he became the youngest player to ever record a triple-double at the time. This was despite him not being able to shoot a basketball, bear in mind. But Philly had already decided that enough was enough, and gave up on the former first overall pick when he was just 20 years old. This is all so crazy because there are so many what-if scenarios. I mean, can you imagine Fultz as the 6th man on that 2009 2019 Sixers team with Jimmy Butler? I mean, just being used as a defender, would he have made a difference in that series versus the Toronto Raptors? I guess we'll never know. Either way, Orlando was the perfect place for Markelle Fultz to go to. The pressure was off of him, he didn't need to lead his team to many wins, and he could rack up many minutes and experience without any risk to his overall value. And that's exactly what would happen. He'd average 27 minutes a night in his first season with the Magic, and things really started to look up for him. His numbers improved, he looked more explosive, and he even tried out a brand new jump shot. Granted, he still shot very poorly from three, but he was much better from inside the arc than he was at Philly. He was no superstar just yet, but it seemed like Orlando had found a really solid core piece in Fultz. He was their full-time starting point guard at this point, and was even averaging over 5 assists per game, showing that Philly may have made a horrific mistake trading him away. Well, unfortunately for Markelle and the entire basketball world, really, that wouldn't happen. Shortly into his second season in Orlando, Markelle Fultz would suffer a season-ending torn ACL, right when he had started to show the star-scoring potential he had in college. At this point, Orlando had already drafted point guard Cole Anthony in the first round of the 2020 draft, and he had completely broken out as a rookie, so it's not like the point guard position was completely lacking without Fultz, even though he was a huge loss. On top of that, they had taken another guard in Jalen Suggs with a top 5 pick in the 2021 NBA draft, so there was some competition in the backcourt. When Fultz ultimately came back in February of 2022, it seemed like he would just be a role player behind these young guards that Orlando had used their draft capital on. However, following his ACL tear, Fultz would play the best basketball of his professional career, especially in 2023. That year, he'd regain the starting job from Cole Anthony, start a career-high 60 games, and record career highs in points, assists, rebounds, and steals per game on top of a career-high 51.4% field goal percentage. He was making flashy plays, hitting circus layups, and dishing impossible dimes, and it felt like he was on top of the world, just like he was supposed to be as the #1 overall pick. But yet, despite this, Orlando decided to draft another point guard with a top 6 pick in Anthony Black. And this is after Fultz had already broken out. It made no sense at the time considering how deep the Magic backcourt already was, on top of guys like Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner carrying the load offensively, but it turns out they knew exactly what they were doing. Last season, Fultz unfortunately dealt with tendonitis in his surgically repaired knee, resulting in him only playing half the year, and in those games he only played around 20 minutes per game compared to the 30 minutes the year before, so it seemed like his time in Orlando was dying out and that he'd have to find a new home. But with the way he played when he was on the court, he would definitely have a team that was willing to take a chance on him in free agency, right? Well, somehow at this point, Markelle Fultz is still sitting in free agency, and the season starts in less than a month, which is very surprising to me. When you take a look at Markelle Fultz's entire career, all you can think of is missed potential, and it's missed potential in the strangest way possible. We've never seen a player that lost their ability to shoot in the NBA, and it seems like this was a recurring theme in his career. Right when it seems like Markelle Fultz was able to get it back together, things would come crumbling for him once again. I don't think he'll ever scratch the surface of his potential, but he would be a fan favorite on any team that he went to, and he has the entire NBA rooting for him to succeed. But I guess teams are scared to take a chance on somebody who's been so frail, and it kind of makes sense. If you're spending this much money to sign somebody to your team, you want them to be able to play for your team. Unless you're the Lakers, of course. I guess they just like giving Gabe Vincent money for no reason. But honestly, I think at this point in his career, Fultz would be a near perfect fit on any team that decides to take a chance on him. I know his jumper never fully recovered, but his athleticism and playmaking alone are worth so much more than someone like Jalen Hood Schifino. You know what? Bring him to LA. We didn't really sign anyone anyways. In all seriousness, the fact that he's still a free agent is absolutely insane to me. I never thought this would be Markelle Fultz's fate when the Sixers decided to trade up to the #1 overall pick. And as a result, Fultz's story will forever be one of the most unfortunate cases of the injury bug in NBA history.